All right, so welcome everybody. This is the BannermanTech podcast, and today we have a very special guest, a good friend of mine and colleague, Jeremy Wonson. The goal of today's call is to just get to know Jeremy a little bit, talk about his childhood, his life, his career, all the great things he's learned over the years, and maybe some things that some people can listen and pick up. I'll let Jeremy go into his background, but we've been working together at CDW for a while now, and he is an amazing colleague and guy. Really tuned into kind of the latest in IT, and I think there's a lot of good stuff we're going to talk about. So without further ado, let's get started.
I see you got the memo. You wore black too.
Yeah, exactly, right?
You got the black shirt memo.
Gotta go. We were joking before the podcast that we should have wore our shades, right?
Right.
So, Jeremy, welcome. And before we get started, we do it all the time at work. Do you want to just do like your high-level elevator pitch intro for the world?
Yeah, sure. Well, I've been in IT now and technology now. I always go on the conservative side. I'll explain more later. But I always say about 3 decades, roughly 3 decades. It's been a lot more than that, but let's just say that. And I have just been following technology curves, so started out as a Unix sysadmin and, paid my dues in operations and support. And, after a while, I did a startup. And so I've done several startups and gone from, say when Linux first came out and really, hit the scene. Then I started understanding Linux and getting to know that. When SAN happened, storage area networks, I got into that. VMware, VMware 3.x certified, right? So as soon as VMware was on the scene, like, hey, let's get certified, let's learn that, converged infrastructure, hyper-converged, cloud, hybrid cloud, right? All this kind of stuff. I just been following, right?
So what you're saying is that you're one of the many and the best in the industry that are always learning new things, which I think anybody you talk to in our industry that's any good at it will tell you that. Like, you can't just learn one thing and kind of dive in. This is more industry about learning and changing than it is about being really good at one thing your whole career.
Yeah,
which is what I love about it.
Yeah, no, I agree, and you're very kind. I don't know about being the best or anything like that, but I've worked for some large and small companies, right? So enterprises like ExxonMobil, AT&T, and vendors like Dell, EMC, Microsoft in the Azure side, and then integrators or consulting companies like Forsyth and Sirius, and now CDW. Even though CDW is oftentimes seen as a hardware software company, we're you and we're on the consulting side.
Yeah, and we're changing that perception day by day, customer by customer.
That's right. Yeah. Maybe more than once a day.
Yeah. If we can, right? We strive to it.
Now you told me you were going to ask me about music.
Yeah, we are going to talk about. Do you want to start there? I was going to start with your childhood, but maybe if you want to start with music. So yeah, tell me about your current music taste first. Like what's Jeremy listen to right now, and also tell me about how you listen to music, because I find different people are different with that. So like me, I'm in the car always, but gym always, but then also I'll go on kicks where if I don't have music, if I'm not talking to somebody, I have to be listening to music. So like tell me about both sides of it, what you like and how you listen.
Yes, I definitely listen to music a lot. I have kind of opened my my music taste to my kids, but only to a certain degree. So I have a son who, my youngest son is interested in rap, right? And I haven't had any of my other kids. None of them have been really that interested in rap. So it's like kind of new to me. I mean, rap's not new to me, but like really trying to appreciate it. That's new to me. And then, of course, my youngest daughter is interested in pop. And for the longest time, I have avoided that. I've kind of said, you're going to listen to my 80s, hairband rock, and I'm going to try to convert you to like, Rat and Dokken and, Def Leppard and all that and Poison. But, I decided, like I'll give it a shot, and yeah. So I still though I kind of revert back usually to jazz, which I've been listening to since I was a teenager. And jazz, specifically from a music appreciation class in college, I've learned is like bop and hard bop, like that part of jazz.
Yeah.
So think like Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie, Stan Getz, Charlie Parker, Cannonball and Coltrane, right? Cannonball Adderley, John Coltrane, Oscar Peterson, and the Oscar Peterson Trio. So that kind of jazz where there's just a lot of an improvisation and actually some amazing melodies just kind of pop out of there, and
Yeah.
so yeah.
Where did that come from? Hold on. So you said teenage years you started in
Yeah.
jazz. I don't think most teenagers in your decade were like jazz first, right? I
Jazz,
think it,
baby.
it, it would be it would be
Yeah.
more that rat 80s kind of
Right.
side of things, right? So where did that
Yeah.
come from? Did you have an influence or just found it yourself?
Great question. I think that came from, actually a friend of my dad's was really into jazz, and whenever he would come over and hang out with the family, he would bring his jazz records, vinyl, and we'd
Yeah.
listen, to some of that, some Oscar Peterson Trio with Stan Getz and Cannonball and Coltrane, and I was just like, you know.
So were you the kid that hung out with his dad and his friends and kind of were sitting at the end of the table, like trying to be part of the group
Smoking a
and the conversation?
stogie? No, I'm just kidding.
Like,
No,
but were you that like?
yeah,
Because a lot of kids are mature like that, and then
yeah.
they'd rather be with the adults than in the corner playing with their Nerf guns or whatever, right? So
I have a little bit of both, but I definitely could sit down at a young age and have adult conversations, and I was fine with quiet time, reading,
mm,
uh, you know, so always had a love of learning,
yep,
and that served me like my whole life. And I've always had, I know this is going to sound strange, but I really enjoy work.
yeah, no, I
Like
get that.
satisfaction of a job well done, the satisfaction of like, doing something and seeing the results.
Yeah,
It's actually one of the things that frustrates me a little bit about IT, right? About technology, is that often, especially in our role, we do a lot of strategic things, and that
yep,
means that sometimes you won't see the fruits of your labor for years,
yep.
at least months.
Or
And
ever, if depending on what it is, right? You might do all this great work, and then somebody else is the actual one who uses it or sees it.
Yeah,
You don't even see the results, right? Yeah,
so true.
especially in
Yeah.
infrastructure.
Well, and it's one of the reasons that we do projects around the house. I do my own yard work, like that kind of thing, because I get to see the immediate results, right? Like you see a lawn that needs help, you go and work on it, and like an hour later or 2 hours later, you're like, wow, that looks great.
Yeah,
Look at what I just did. This is great. I finished a job.
yeah. It
I
it
didn't create a strategy, and like in the next few months or years, that lawn might get mowed. No, no, no.
yeah.
I saw it. I conquered it. It's done. Yeah, I
I see
love
that a lot. Like I do a lot of my own stuff too. I work on my own cars, like guitars. I started playing guitar many years ago and started building
that.
guitars and modifying and
That's awesome.
like same thing. Yeah, I think it's where thing people in IT are generally thing and technology people and if we didn't have IT to work in, we'd all be doing some kind of engineering or mechanics or something like that. So it kind of fits in. So back to the music thing though. So tell me about like what was your first did you go to many concerts as a kid? What was your first like live music experience?
Oh man. I hadn't thought about my first live music experience. Let's see. Well, I mean, the one that is popping up in my head was when I was an adult, just
Yeah.
because it was the most memorable. I went to a Rush concert, and that was in 2000. Oh no, no, I take that back. That was in 90, maybe maybe 97, something like that, or 96. Yeah,
Very cool.
95. Anyway,
What
it was a long time ago.
yeah.
And I was, oh no, it was more like 95. I was, or 94. So I was a bellman at the Hyatt Hill Country Resort in San Antonio, across
Nice.
across from SeaWorld. And at the time, I was biology pre-med, and so I was working full time, going to school full time, had wife and kids,
Yep.
barely making it, and the one of the few perks of being a bellman was that the concierge, we were really closely connected with the concierge. And the golf staff, right, and the golf pros.
Yep.
And so we would trade favors back and forth. And at one, they knew I was a Rush fan, and so they came to me and they were like, "Hey, we just got a line on like fourth row, right at the
Nice.
center, Rush tickets, two of them. What do you think?" And
Oh,
I'm
that's
like,
intense.
"Yeah."
Yeah, I bet.
Right? So yeah,
That's awesome.
we went to Rush right there, and I mean, I actually made eye contact, right, with Geddy Lee. And I had a guitar pick thrown right at me,
Oh,
right?
that's
Like I
awesome.
caught it. Yeah, I mean, it was
Yeah.
like,
You still got it, right?
yeah,
You
yeah,
didn't,
yeah. Oh
yeah,
yeah,
you better.
absolutely.
That's
You
awesome.
know, yeah, it was
That's
pretty crazy.
awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's cool. I love there's like you can be a music lover. There's something special though, I think, about live music that just can't you can listen to music all day, but I try to get to as many concerts as I can. And yeah, some of my best stories are definitely music story, going out to a show as a young guy or adult. Me and my wife have been to some of the best shows ever. We won't go into it because it's not my interview or my podcast, but like I always love to ask people about that. So okay, so that's cool. And then just like you ever played any musical instruments or been involved in music or just a big admirer?
Yeah, that actually is probably the other reason that I think I kind of was attracted to jazz. I played the alto sax in junior high,
Oh, cool.
and yeah, and just loved it. It's interesting. I I learned how to read music when I was in band. Just in junior high. I was in the Azores, Portugal. That's where I was at a military school.
Hold on. Back up. So hold on. All right, don't back up. Finish your story, but we're gonna have to go back to
Yeah,
that because I didn't
yeah,
know you were a military brat and
I
did
am.
some traveling in your youth
Yeah,
either. We'll have to talk about
yeah, yeah,
that. This is why
yeah.
we start with childhood, Jeremy. But
Sorry, man.
okay, it's
I know, I'm
okay. It's
messing you
okay.
all
We'll
up.
get back to it. We'll get back to it.
Right.
So you're in
Yeah.
Portugal, okay, and you're
So,
playing the alto sax, just crushing it
right.
like Bill Clinton with the Ray-Bans and the sax, and I can
Right, right.
imagine. Okay.
Exactly. No Oval Office, but
Yeah.
still,
Yep. Or
and
scandals. Yeah.
of course, yeah, well, more scandals. But yeah, I loved it, and my goal was to be able to play, without having the music. So basically, like, pick a song, and be able to know where the notes are, so I
Yeah.
can just play it. Because what I wanted to do,
Understand the key and understand the
yeah,
theory so you can, put it together and improvise like your
right.
jazz, heroes there. So it makes
Well, and
sense.
connect the sound to the keys,
Yeah.
right? Or the
Yep.
pads or whatever.
Yeah. You hear
And
a sound and you go, I know which button to hit and how to blow
yeah,
and I can make that happen. Yeah.
yeah, rather
Understood.
than having to see it on a music sheet and saying, "Oh, that note, yeah, I can play that." Instead, I wanted to be able to hear it and play it. And that's what I got to, right?
Oh wow.
I would play constantly, and that's what I got to, where I could say, to my mom, like, "Hey, ask for a particular song," and she would, and then I would sound out the song on the sax because I could just pick out the notes.
Nice.
I got familiar enough. So
That's crazy because so you're familiar with the term perfect pitch or like the skill. Have you ever heard of that?
yeah, sure, yeah.
So where there's people that are born that way, and I've actually like looked into that over the years, and there are kids, and some people believe you can train your young kids by having them listen to things, and a lot of people will say you'll never get to true perfect pitch, but with enough practice you can get where you're saying you are, and it's interesting. I wish there was a good way to really measure that because I've thought about it with my kids. We did the whole music thing, and my kids still listen to good music all the time, and have really good taste too, surprisingly. They get obsessed with like any other kid, a certain thing, and then it's just they play it to death. But I've always wondered that, like, if one of these days he's gonna hear a note and go, "Yeah, that's the person out of Star Wars," and you're like, "Hold on, how do you know that?" You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
The
But he
perfect
hasn't.
pitch is a little different. Perfect pitch is like that's not a C. That's slightly flat. You got to
Yeah,
go a little bit. Yeah,
yeah. You gotta
I don't
be
know that I
really
don't know that I
low.
have that exactly, but
Yeah.
I don't have perfect pitch, but I can sound things out. And actually, that's how I play the piano sometimes. Is I'll just sound things out, and I get really close. But I over time I've lost the ability to read music really.
Kidding.
Except for vocally. So vocally,
Huh.
I can look at a piece and guys sing in the choir and all that. I look at a piece
Oh,
and
I didn't know that. You sing in a
I know how.
choir now or
Yeah,
did?
yeah, right now, yeah.
Oh, very cool.
Have for
Very
years
cool.
and years. Bass.
I don't know much about like the different voice ranges, but if you had to classify yourself, what kind of voice range are you in?
Yeah, bass.
Bass. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Once it gets above the staff,
Yep.
it gets a little harder. I think if you go like maybe two lines above, yeah, that
Yeah.
total falsetto, rough. It's
Not
rough
for you.
falsetto. Not
Yeah.
no.
That's
Go
not where you
below
fit
the
in.
staff. Yeah, below the staff, I'm fine.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah, yeah, on the bass class. But anyway, so yeah, yeah. That's I played that. I've messed around, like I said, on the piano a little bit, and um, my kids are extremely musical. So I've played around on things like the clarinet and the trumpet and the flute. Flute was an
Was-
interesting one. Piccolo is impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
because my
just
hands are too big. I can't hold it.
oh,
Yeah,
gotcha. Gotcha.
yeah.
Yeah.
There,
Little
you have to be able
dainty.
to hold it a certain way, and my hands wouldn't hold it like that. It just wouldn't work.
That's
So
hilarious.
whatever.
So did you encourage that? That's something I like to talk to people about. So we'll get more into it later once we kind of get to your adult life and being a dad and all that stuff. But like, was that something that you went out of your way to encourage your children to do and get into
Right.
music, or were they like just you gave them the first push and they ran off with it further than you expected?
Well, we have like a musical household, right? So, my wife grew up with music. She sings, she plays the piano, she plays the violin,
Oh, it's
so
awesome.
very musical, and I am too, right? And actually there's some interesting books about music and the brain and music and our bodies and just how in tune we are with music, like how much we need as humans, we need music
Oh,
in
yeah.
our lives. Yeah,
Have you?
I'll share a couple books with you at some point. Yeah.
Well, to ask you about that, the one theory that I heard not too long ago, I don't know where I heard it, probably some podcast or something, was someone talking about how it relates to kind of primal experiences in our history, right? So,
Hmm.
big bass notes and loud roars, kind of, animals, and imagine a lion or a bear or something, and then kind of the more neat stuff is you're in a meadow looking, listening to birds chirp and stuff like that. And I feel like that I'm interested to read it. You should definitely point me to those books. I feel like that's so true. It's crazy how I'm not scared to admit anytime my wife puts on like The Voice where they have like the golden ticket winners
Yeah.
or whatever. It's
Oh
like it's
yeah.
so hard not to cry, and you're like, I never cry except for when
I'm
that
not
perfect
crying,
singer.
you're crying.
Yeah, except for
Yeah.
when that singer sings, right? Uh,
Yeah.
that's awesome, man. Okay, well let's digress to because I do want to hear now, especially that I know that you're a military brat, because I imagine there's some very interesting, and I hope that you don't take that as derogatory. It's just
No, it's all
the
good.
only I
I
haven't heard
myself
any.
have.
Yeah, okay, good. So because I haven't heard any better versions of that. I don't know if in your community you guys have a better version that you use, but so tell me about that. So where'd you grow up, and was your home life like? It sounds like you had interesting parents who pushed you into stuff. Kind of give me the story.
Yeah. So, well, let's see. I was born in Houston, Texas, and pretty quickly, my mom and dad. My dad was in the Air Force, so my mom and dad had to move to Panama,
Yeah.
and with the Air Force. So they moved to
What year
Panama.
are we talking about here too, by
I
the
was
way?
born in '70.
Okay,
Yeah.
so shortly after, so Wow, that's an interesting time to be in Panama too, for sure.
Yes, it
Okay.
is. Or yes, it was. I was a little kid, right? I was like, I think I was 18 months old when we got there and almost 3 when we left. Yeah, I think I was there for maybe it was 2.5. I think it was only there for about a year, you know.
Okay. Yep.
But yeah, it was just like a 1 year or so, trip to Panama. We stayed there at that Air Force base, and I actually learned a little Spanish.
Mm,
And I had a local friend, that I would hang out with my age.
yep.
He was actually, I think he was about a year older, and he had a dog, and so I
Oh,
would
cool.
I would hang out with him and his dog and everything. And I remember one time my mom was freaking out and trying to like beat the wall with a broom. And later on, I found out because I told my mom this. I was like, I have this weird memory of you freaking out, and I think it was in Panama, based on what the house looked like in my mind. But you were beating the wall with a broom, and she's like, "Oh yeah, they had these huge spiders." And she said, "It was probably one of those times." That happened several times.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like,
Oh
with a
man.
broom beating the spider away because it had these huge spiders. Anyway, so yeah, I
Doesn't
was there
surprise
for a
me.
while, and then we moved to San Antonio, Texas.
Okay.
And my dad was stationed there. So actually, like, my parents got divorced. My dad wanted to be, he was like a hippie. He got into the Air Force because his draft number was up. And
Yep.
so he decided, I'm going to join the force I want to join. So
Yep.
he joined the Air Force. He didn't want to be in there after, came back from Panama. So he was able to get out.
Nice.
And he said, well, I want to go to New York and be a hippie, and I'm a musician, and so I want to just live the hippie lifestyle, open marriage,
Yep.
drugs,
Go live
all
in
that
the
all that kind of
village.
stuff. You
Yep.
want to come with me? And she's like, we have a child. Like,
And yeah.
no,
And we're from Texas. Like
right?
what?
Like, no, no drugs, no open marriage, no, no.
Yeah.
And so he took off, and I heard from him again when I was in my early 20s. No, I
Oh,
take it
okay.
back. About 19 or 20, somewhere in there, I heard from him again. But a little while after he left, like maybe a year or so after he left, my mom started dating the guy who I call dad, right?
Okay, gotcha.
And
I
yeah,
also, by the way, I'm also 3 years old. Mom breaks up and moves me to Massachusetts. Dad stays in Florida drinking beer and fishing, and isn't interested until I hit like 22 and start making crazy money. And then
look
all
at
of a
that.
sudden it's like, oh hey, because the ego
Uh,
boost kind of thing. I think it was like,
yeah.
oh, you're doing so well, so young. How'd that happen? It's like not thanks to you, right? Not that like, and like my mom is
Yeah.
always. I don't know about your mom. I'd be interested to hear this. My mom is always really good about telling me about the good things about my dad that I never got to see, but never like, getting
Right.
really venomous, right? So
Yeah.
I didn't have like a whole lot of issues, which I know a lot of people who do. So I'm glad that I don't feel like I have major daddy issues, but I think everybody who's been in that situation feels a little bit of it. But it's good that you had, because I have a stepdad too that came in at 5 and is my dad.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
literally I was talked before this, like that's like the whole
Is that
mechanic
right?
thing we were talking about. Like we
Yeah.
talk every night, and I was helping him with some repair stuff. And but so sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
no, no,
Okay,
no,
so
no. That's
new dad
cool.
comes in, and what's he like?
No, he's awesome. Yeah, he's great dad. So yeah, he, like I said, did really well, and he always has been there for me. So yeah, just amazing dad. He was also in the Air Force,
No
right? And
kidding.
so
So your mom had a type.
I guess,
Inadvertently, apparently, because the first
right?
one was there under duress, or.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we so basically I was brought up at that time by my grandparents who lived in New Braunfels, which is just a little north of San Antonio. And then, my mom lived in San Antonio, and my stepdad, who I'm just going to call dad from now on, through this story, um he and my mom brought me up, but they would constantly take me to my grandparents. So my grandparents were like on my mom's side were like a huge part of my life,
Awesome.
my childhood. Well, he kept getting reassigned and reassigned to different bases in San Antonio. We were there for 12 years,
Wow.
you know,
Okay.
and he was
What did he do? What did he do for them?
he did accounting and finance.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
so he worked for a group called Electronic Security Command,
Hmm.
right? And I didn't really think much of it until I got a small tour of his facility. And it was like, I get there and there are guards with machine guns and dogs. And I'm like, what's going on here? And he's like, well, just a little bit of security here. You guys see this badge right here? Yeah, this badge costs the military like $30,000 to to do all the work to give me this badge. I can't lose this badge,
Yeah,
right?
no
This is
kidding.
what lets me in. So we
Yeah.
went in, we got a little brief tour of the office he works in, and then we went out. And and I've had one other tour of my dad's workplace when I was 17. Other
Gotcha.
than that, I've never seen where my dad works because he's always like funding things that he couldn't really talk about. In fact,
Yeah.
most of our lives, um, my dad's outlet after work, instead of coming home and be like, I can't believe what happened at work, blah, 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 he couldn't say any of that. So he'd come home and he'd work in the garden.
No kidding. Yeah. Get the
So
stress out that
since
way.
I was young, I've been
Yeah.
gardening with my dad because I'm his tiller, right? He's like,
Yeah.
here's a shovel, here's a pick. You see that fourth of the backyard? I need that turned into a garden. Here
Yep.
you go. And I'm like,
Yep.
oh crap. Here we
Yeah.
go.
Well, hey
You
man,
know?
your back is better than his, right?
My back was so strong as a kid. But
Yeah.
yeah, so then we at some point he said, well, right about the time I was 12, roughly in there, he came home and he's like, all right, I have to do a tour overseas. I've been told I have to go overseas. I have a few options, right? And he said like Turkey was one of them. We could have gone to Turkey, but at the time he was reading the sheet on Turkey, and it was me and my two brothers, right? So I have a brother that's like say 6 years younger than me, and a brother that's 8 years younger than me.
Gotcha.
So and the three of us are trouble with a capital T. So anyway, we he says, well, here, like in Turkey, if you look at someone too long, like they can arrest you. Like if you look at a girl for too long, you look at a woman for
Yep.
too long, they can arrest you. If you steal something, they chop off your hand. Like there's,
Yeah.
they're pretty serious. And he goes,
Now, did that go for Americans? Because I feel like a lot of countries today have those rules, but they don't enforce it on Americans. But I think it was a smart move anyways. But do you know if that was actually like if you
it
had
was
stole
then.
something?
It
No
was then. I
kidding.
don't know if you remember, like maybe a couple decades ago or a decade ago, maybe there was an American caned in Singapore
I do
for
remember that.
littering gum. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
it does. It applies. Oh yeah,
No kidding.
it
That's
applies.
crazy. Well,
Yeah.
good dad to be looking out for
He's like,
that.
I don't think this is a good idea. Maybe I shouldn't bring my boys, my
Yeah.
rambunctious boys, to this country.
Yeah, all
But
that
one of the options.
testosterone, and I see it in my kid all the time. I know you have kids, so you know what it's like. It's like that testosterone. You just see it course through their veins, and the evil just comes
Yeah.
out, and you're like, "Oh, geez, I remember what that was like." You know what I mean? Yeah.
So
But yeah,
he saw one of them was the Azores, Portugal, and that's 9 islands, not in the middle of the Atlantic, but it's like 900 miles from Portugal, 1,300 miles from New York,
oh,
right?
okay, huh?
Yeah, and it's kept warm because of the warm ocean and air currents in the Atlantic that kind of hit
Yeah,
the eastern seaboard of the U.S. and then they go around the Atlantic like that. And when they come around like that, they bring all this warm water and warm air. So it's like big broadleaf plants,
oh,
palms,
cool.
and yeah.
Yeah,
So it was like an awesome little island. It was
yeah.
the whole island of Terceira was the city, it was the size of the city of San Antonio. It's not very big.
Wow, no kidding. So
Kind of
you got to kind
mountain.
of go live in a tropical paradise for a little while.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. And
cool.
every time the tornadoes went through and hit the eastern US, they'd come, or the hurricane, sorry, they'd hit the eastern US, the hurricane would go, it would turn into a tropical storm and go this way. And
Yep.
then we'd end up with like 70-mile-an-hour winds.
Oh wow, yeah.
We get all these winds and everything, but yeah, it was fun, and the exchange rate was beautiful.
Yep.
So for
How old were
us,
you at this point, by the way? Did you say 12
uh,
or?
12 to 14, right in there.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool. Okay. You meet any nice island girls in those
Oh
days,
yeah.
or
Oh yeah.
okay,
Absolutely. I
yeah.
learned a little Portuguese.
I was gonna ask that. Yeah,
Spanish
you had
didn't
the
help. I mean, it didn't
little bit of
hurt.
Spanish Panama
Yeah, yeah.
days, right? And
It didn't hurt. Yeah, I
okay.
learned enough Portuguese to talk to the ladies, but I
And their
was.
food is, I mean, I had a
Oh,
friend who was
yeah.
Portuguese in Massachusetts, and his family, man, they can cook. Like, you want to talk about some good food.
Oh
They
yeah.
got some good taste over there for sure.
Yeah, it was awesome, and we were there for like I said, till I was almost 15, and then so I was like 85, and then we moved. He got stationed then to Colorado Springs, Colorado,
Okay.
Pete Field. So we drove across. We flew to New Jersey, and then he bought a car. He bought a station wagon, and we drove across country. To for him to report to Pete Field. And he was at Pete Field for a few years, and then he went to the Air Force Academy and was there for a few years. Then he went to this base that doesn't exist anymore, really. Well, I think it exists, but it's not what it used to be. It used to be called Falcon. And so it's like up 24, like I think on the way to Lyman or something. But um, when he was there, it was a no visitor center base.
Yep.
They see you from a ways out. Um, there's huge fence, big concrete area, huge fence. The wedge where you drive in.
Yep.
Man traps to walk in.
Yep.
And the boxes where you have to have a code. You get in. You have like looks at your eye. It does the sensor. You put the hand on the thing, and then you enter another code.
Yep.
And guards with machine guns and with M16s and the guard dogs. So I got to see.
I'm sensing
There.
you were proud of your dad every time
Yeah,
you got to
totally,
see
man.
where
He
he
was
worked, because
awesome.
it is cool, right? Like, that's really cool as a
Yeah.
kid. Like, dang, Dad, you're
Oh
doing
yeah.
the biometrics, and
Oh
I
yeah.
you ever heard of Bob Lazar? The
No.
So Bob Lazar is one of these guys who came out and talked about UFOs way back, and he brought up there's some credibility to his story because he brought up like elements that weren't on the periodic table that now are, element 115, and then he brought some people out to see test flights in Roswell that like separate people and all this stuff. And I don't know if I buy the story because I think a lot of it, if you dig deep enough, there was documents that you could find these details and put them together. But he's been consistent for like 40 years with his story that he worked at Los Alamos Labs and he was a rocket engineer and blah blah blah. But the reason I bring him up is he was saying in the 70s or 80s that they had not only hand scanners like fingerprint, but that they had ones that measured the lengths of your bones in your hand
Oh,
and
okay.
used that, which is, I guess, more accurate or, in some way more interesting than a fingerprint, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but whatever. And apparently that is now, well known that yes, they did have that. So like he has a lot of
Yeah.
credibility, but like I wonder if that scanner he was using was what Bob Lazar was, talking about at the time or blabbing about, depending on how you look at it, right?
I don't
Um,
know, but I mean, the base was ridiculous because you get through the man traps, and then there was this huge moat, and I mean really deep, like probably
no
three
kidding.
cars deep. And then there's the building, and we actually got to go into his office this time. We go into the building, and like all the walls are the same color with the same number of doors and the same color doors. Like everything was
Wow.
like no signs, no numbers, no anything. He just walks down a ways, and then he opens one of the doors, and it happens to be stairs. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, how
It's
did
like
you know
that.
that?
It's like the
And then
white rooms in the Matrix,
yeah,
when
right.
the key
Yeah,
maker
then we
takes you
went
in
down.
and
We went down what seemed to be impossibly long stairs, down to another level, same sort of layout. And he goes all the way to one end, and then he opens the door once again, nondescript door. We go in, and there's a safe, what looks like a bank safe that's open. But inside, instead of being like safety deposit boxes, there's a desk with a bunch of paperwork on it and a typewriter.
no
Uh,
kidding.
and he's
Was
like,
the
"That's where I
vault
work."
part of it to lock in his stuff so that people couldn't get to the financials? And
No, no,
what
no.
was
The
that?
lock, the vault door closes because it puts like it was like, this thick, right? It puts that much, I don't know, metal, lead, steel, I don't know, that much metal in the way. Because what he was saying, because I asked the same question, I'm like, why do you need to work in here? I mean, it's
Yeah.
not locked now. What,
Yeah.
you're not going to keep anybody out. He goes, no, 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 no. It's not about keeping people out. I have a special typewriter. Normally in a typewriter, when you type, it makes certain sounds. And so
Oh,
they can
gotcha.
tell just by listening,
Yeah.
they hear the sounds of the keys you're pressing, and they're like, oh, that's an H. Oh,
Yeah.
that's an I.
The original keylogger, right? Get a
Right.
little recorder in there, and you can
Yeah.
break down exactly what he was
And
typing.
he's like,
And
I have a special typewriter, extremely expensive typewriter. It hardly makes any sound at all. And then I'm in this vault in the basement of this building because that makes it extremely difficult for anyone to hear the sounds of me typing.
no
And so
kidding.
that's what it is. And I'm like, holy cow. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know what you're funding, but I don't want to know. I don't
Yeah.
want to know.
For all the
Right.
listeners out there, so for all the listeners who think like, oh yeah, the government and a lot of people say the government's incompetent. Like, don't get me wrong, everybody has their problems, but like, let's remember this is the '80s, guys, and
Right.
they were going to these lengths then. So imagine what we do now with all the computers and technology, and we get to see some of that in our work, which is really interesting. But people don't realize like a lot of this stuff's well thought out. They spend a lot that money, they got a lot of money and they spend a lot of money.
Well, and
And
any
it's
technology you know about now, like they've known for a really, really long time. You think
oh
about like the
yes.
SR-71 was, what, like built in 63 or 65 or something like that.
Yeah.
That thing went so fast at so high, the windshield was melting, right?
Yeah.
It was that fast. And you want to think, oh yeah, that's when it happened, right? Like it was in the late 60s that they were doing this. No,
That's
no,
just
that's
when
what they're
it's built.
telling you, right?
Yeah.
Anytime they give you like dates and, oh look, there's the Blackbird, right? Like it's already been around for a long time. And
Yep.
now they can allow the public to know.
Because
And
the next
sometimes that's
Blackbird
because
is
somebody
already
saw it.
there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or the next thing's already done.
the next
That's old
thing.
and they want them to
Right.
think that's the best we
Yeah,
got.
whatever
And
technology they have now, you don't know about, and years from
yeah.
now you go, well, if we'd only had this technology before, like, no, you probably had it, but only certain people had it. But anyway, so I digress. So then that's where I went to. That's where I went to a year of junior high, and then high school, and 1 year of college. That's where I met my wife, and we got married there, and
Hold on,
I mean,
stop, slow
yeah,
down.
yeah.
So tell me about the meeting of the wife. So I haven't met your wife yet. And I wouldn't recommend sharing her name, but like, where'd you meet her? How'd that go? Tell me about that a little bit.
Well, so I met her in a class, right?
Where were you
Uh,
going to school, or
I was
where were
going to
you at?
school in Colorado Springs,
Okay.
Colorado. So
So high
yeah, the
school.
Doherty High School, go Spartans.
Okay.
But,
Cool. Shout out. Right. Why not?
right,
Right.
yeah. And weirdly enough, our field CISO,
Hmm.
Steve,
Went to
yeah,
the same
he went to
school.
Doherty. Yeah,
Different
yeah.
years, or were you
I
guys
think
around the same time?
I think it was 2 years before me.
No
Yeah,
kidding. Small
yeah.
world.
Yeah, or he graduated 2 years before me, which means he was part of the group. So I've been 6 foot and I've been pretty big since I was in ninth grade.
Yep.
And Doherty was a 3-year high school, 10, 11, 12. So
Yep.
when I got into Doherty, they thought I was just like I moved into town and I was a senior, right? Because
Gotcha. Yeah.
size of the seniors,
Yep.
I had grown a little early. And so I used to, during sophomore Hell Week, I used to make the seniors back off and I'd get this, sophomores off the ground, like they'd make them walk around on their hands and knees and go beep beep, I'm a Jeep, I mean, it was all kinds of things, right? Like count the tiles, the cinder block things on the wall with your nose. I mean, all kinds of things. And I'd make them back off and they were like, you're no fun. And I'd have a bunch of sophomores going, hey, there's a senior that's looking out for us. And I'm like, shh, I'm a sophomore.
Don't tell them.
Yeah. So anyway, it was, Yeah, but when I was a senior, I was actually in a class with my wife, and anyway, yeah, I at any rate, I met her. I realized she was way above, my. I married up, right? It
Yeah,
was. I was like, man, if I could date her, like she's amazing. Yeah, she's above my station, right? But
sure.
I'll try, and so I did everything I could to impress her and kind of endear myself to her. And sure enough, by the end of the year, she wanted to date me. So I was
Nice.
able, well, during the summer and then during her senior year, because she was actually a year ahead of me or a year behind me, I was able to date her while I was going to college. So she was dating a college guy.
I was gonna say because it's rare that you go up
Yeah,
if they're older than you or the same.
right.
I
Yeah.
won't brag, but I did have one of those in high school that was she was 2 years older than me and also like a smoke show and had a car, man. She was driving me to I was a freshman and she was a junior and she was driving me to school and but that's
Yeah.
that's rare. That's super rare. So
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know. No, I shouldn't do this on video. I'll tell you, when it's not
we can
recorded, I have a really funny story for you
we
in
can
that
edit out
realm.
too. Don't worry, I will edit out. But
In that realm.
yeah,
But yeah, don't worry, I'll remember.
yeah.
So yeah, that's and we got so we got married like a couple years later.
Mhm.
And yeah, we just, you know, been married ever since, like 30 years.
So that is
Yeah.
wonderful, and I love to hear that. Me and my
Yeah.
wife now are going on, what are we, 5, I think. We got married in 2018.
Congratulations.
So we're going on 5. Yeah, thanks.
Awesome.
And I met her like we were together a long time before we got married, and then we finally did it. But I'm always glad to hear when people are able to do that. It's sad how many people get divorced and
Yeah.
have 3, 4 times, and so let me ask you this. So you started in college, but I know is and something I want to get into later with you that I know about
Yeah.
you. You didn't finish, did you? You left at some
A
point, or you started,
long,
or
not a
yeah, it
long.
just took you a long time to finish. But
Do
how
you, do you
long
want
did
to
you
hear
go to
that story?
school? Yeah, like let's talk about that a little bit and kind of
Okay.
lay. So let me preface this. Like
Yeah.
I want to hit on this because I think a lot of people, I think our society really pushes that you go to high school, you do get good grades, you go straight into college, and that's the only way you're going to be anything but, blue
Right.
collar, et
The only
cetera.
way to
And
success.
and it's totally not true. At the same
Right.
time, like I'm not saying you shouldn't go to college, especially for jobs that require it, or if you're looking to be the top of whatever field you're in, it's going to help you. I think my biggest thing with it is that like some people who have capability and aptitude maybe it's not the best route at 18 to sit in a classroom for another 4 years, right? And maybe you
Yeah.
should get out in the world and get some experience. So when you told me kind of your education story, I thought it was really good and something we should touch on. Because my hope is that people will watch this, younger dudes who are trying to figure out, and girls too. But YouTube and most podcasts are mostly a male medium, unfortunately. But I'd like people to see that, like, hey, there are a lot of successful people who started out working and then maybe they went back later and got their degree and went to an advanced degree. There's others like me. I'm now, pretty far in and still haven't gone back and finished, right? So
Right.
if you're young and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to do another 4 years of school, but I want to, do cool stuff, it might not be over for you. But so tell me about that. So you graduated and where'd you start college at?
Well, I went to UCCS, so
Okay.
University of Colorado in Colorado Springs. But I
Yep.
went to a number of colleges actually, because I also went to like Pikes Peak Community College. Okay, so first of all, I did a lot of fun stuff in high school.
Yeah.
And maybe I wasn't the kid that went to class all the time.
Yep.
You know,
I was also one of those kids, so I hear you.
and I was very, very impatient with my teachers too. So I had this. I had so first of all, I learn more through listening and and seeing than
Mhm.
I do through writing. And some people need to write it out several times, and that's how they learn. My
Yeah.
wife is like that actually. She does homework. She underlines stuff she's reading. She'll highlight. she'll make notes. And that kind of stuff distracts me and doesn't really help me, but it helps her. It actually focuses her. And so
Yep.
she gets amazing grades. She'll have like, 4.0. But she puts a lot of effort into the writing and the notes and the underlining, all that. I don't do that. If there's something I'm interested in, right, something I want to learn, I have like sometimes near perfect recall, so
Yeah.
it's, if I want to know it, I'll remember it. And so I would in class, and by the way, I love to learn, right? So
Yeah.
I'm in class and I'm listening to the teacher and they're talking about, whatever it is, doesn't matter if it's history or math or whatever. I pick it up pretty quickly. And then they give me like, okay, here's 100 problems, or go, read this and write an essay on it. The essay I'm not too bad with. I'll do that because that sounds like fun. I get to give my opinion on something, fine. But go do this 100 times. No. And I
Yeah.
mean, since I was a kid, no.
Yeah.
And so, what I found is anytime I had a class like that, because I didn't have the discipline to actually do the work, do what was required of me, even if I didn't like it, but do the thing that was required. Because I didn't have the patience to do that, I failed a bunch of classes in high school.
Yeah.
And then what happened was my junior year, near the end of my junior year, I started to kind of like, I think the way I described it was my brain started plugging back in, and I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I'm
Wait a
like
minute.
bunking out of school. I'm, like I'm horsing around all the time, doing things I shouldn't do.
Like,
I'm an idiot. Like
yeah, you started
I
to
have to,
see.
yeah, I have to change this. Like this is not good.
Yeah.
This is not leading the direction I want to make my life to lead. So I just decided, okay, I'm gonna do the things that I don't like to get where I want to be. And
Sure.
so I started, doing my homework and blah, 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 and attending class all the time, even though oftentimes at the beginning of the lecture when they, said, "Here's what we're going to learn about," and I'm like, "Well, this was in the reading. I just read this. Why are you going over it again?"
Yeah.
But I'd still sit through the class. So anyway, I did that, and then I went to my counselor and I said, "How can I graduate at the end of this year?" Because this was my beginning of my senior year, and she's like, "Well, I'm not sure. Let me look." And then we figured it out. I would have to basically have no free period, so
Yep.
take a class every period, and then I also had to go to night school, like with the GED students, and take 2 or 3 classes at night school. And
Yep.
so that's what I did my senior year was I basically took classes all day, and then I would go home, have dinner, go to night school, and of course I had a couple of jobs. I've had jobs since I was 10, but that that is how I graduated high school with a 1.75 GPA.
No kidding. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lie to you. So mine's not far off. I think mine was a 2.45. I did the same the first 2 years. I screwed around majorly. I skipped class all the time. I had a car that you could get your license at like you get your permit at 15 and a half, 15 and your license at 15 and a half. I did the driver's ed. I got it at 15 and a half. So I'm sophomore year, like I'd show up to school and I'd drive a bunch of like my brother and a bunch of people from my neighborhood.
Yeah.
And me and my buddy Dana would just get back in our car and leave and
Yeah.
just be like,
Like,
yeah, we're not
knock
going.
off. Like, what do you want to
Yeah,
do?
I'd be like, I'm gonna go to school today, and I'd make it to like third period out of eight, and I'd just go, yeah, we're not finishing school today, and my
That's
story's even interested in that, it's more crazy than that. But I did want to ask you something. So did
yeah.
you have a teacher in your early years before the end of high school that like really stands? I think everybody kind of, most people anyways, have that person that really stands out. Did you have one of those, and who was that? What were they about, and what was that story?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was junior high, not high school, though. I had a okay, I was in the military school and in the Azores, and you can imagine military, right? Like they want you do what you're told, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, it's
And
really strict, right?
right, and
Especially when
so
they got you on an island. It's like you ain't going anywhere, kid.
you're not going anywhere, boy.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was the kid once again who would I'd read a little before class, or I would attend listen to them, and then they'd be like, okay, go do this 100 times. And I'd just go, no, like, I'm not doing that. And so I wouldn't turn in my homework. And they were like, well, you're going to fail the test. I'm like, test me.
Yeah. Yeah, I was
And
that kid too. Should
and
barely
they
show up,
tested
barely
me,
listen, still get an
and I
A.
would ace the test, which made them so angry,
Oh
right? And
yeah.
they
Yeah, they
at
hate
one
that.
point, this one teacher put like this dunce cap on my head, and I swear it was like 5 times taller than my head. It
Oh,
was
that's
so
hilarious.
big, and she made me sit in a corner with the dunce cap on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I get home, and I'm like, I'm not going back to English class. This is why, because we were learning sentence structure, and I'm like, it's not hard, but
Yeah.
anyway, so my mom, I told her what happened. She got all, ticked off. We went down to the principal's office, and she's like, you got to do something.
Yeah.
And they said, well, he's failing several classes. And I said, test me on all of it. And they were like, fine. So they tested me, and I aced all the tests. And they were like, okay, we have a special education class, and we just moved him over to the special ed department. It is combination of people who really need a lot of help learning, and
Yeah.
people who are just like, this is too slow for me. And
Yeah.
so it's move at your own pace. But I had a teacher there who basically said, prove it to me, right? Like,
Yeah.
all the time.
Challenged you.
So,
Yeah.
so it wasn't just like learn the concept, and then just because you say you learned it, you're good. It was like, prove it to me. And so what she basically turned it into was, and that was science and math, really, because and English. But I kind of blossomed in that, because once I learned something, I could say I got it, and she'd go, okay, I'm going to test you. You pass, fine. You move to the next topic. You don't pass, you got to go back and do all this stuff again. I'm like, okay, and I just went, took off, and then get into ninth grade, at my junior high. And they're like, we don't really understand these classes and where it fits and everything. What were you doing before in science? And I was like, biology. I just finished biology. And they were like, yeah, in ninth grade, biology is the like advanced placement course. You can't have already finished that. I don't believe that. What did I say? Test me.
Yeah.
Right? And they were like, no, no, the problem is we don't have another course past
Yeah. Like we have
biology.
nowhere to put you, right? This is the wonders of the public education system.
Right. So I had to
Yeah.
they were like, in fact, we don't even think you're ready for biology, so we're going to put you in earth science. So they put me in earth science, which, funny enough, I had never taken in my previous middle school. So I actually liked earth science because I'd never taken it before. So, hey, this is cool.
Sure. It's new,
So
right?
I go to high school, 10th grade, and they're like, what do you want to take? And I first science. And I was like, well, I've already done biology. So how about chemistry? That's the next one. And they're like, you have to do biology in this school. You can't graduate without biology. I was like, fine, I'll do both of them. You want to do biology and chemistry? I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
sure. So I
Right.
took biology and chemistry my 10th grade year, passed them both, of course, because I'd already done biology. But
Yeah.
anyway.
And it sounds like you
Yeah.
strike me as a guy who would have liked the science. I always like the
Oh,
science
love
classes too.
science.
It's
Yeah.
like, how
And
things
math.
work, how things are, and math too. Yeah. And like you said that you never mind writing, and I was always good at the writing too. It really is like if they would take the repetition out of math for people like us that can pick things up, and once you know it, like there's like I have no sympathy for redoing it. Like it's just yeah, it's just not valuable to me. It's like once I know it, we're good. And by the way, I can always look it back up and learn it again in 5 minutes. So it's not like I
Yeah.
need to drive it into my brain until I'll never forget it. I'm not going to be doing trigonometry 2 years from now, and if I do, I'll pull it up, right? So,
But
okay,
thankfully, I passed high school barely
yep,
with my graduating class. I got through it. And then, yeah, I attended, I had to start out with a community college. This is one
yep,
of the things I tell my kids when they start getting bad grades. It's like, look, you know, you can avoid the pain now,
yep.
or you can accept some of the pain now. Like, when do you want to have the pain? Because
Pay
right
now or
now it's
pay
probably
later.
easier. Yeah,
Yep.
because you're gonna pay for the pain later. Like,
Oh,
high school's
totally.
free, but later you're gonna be paying for community college
Yep.
because a
And you're going
normal
to be in a
college
community
won't let you
college.
in.
And you're going to be at a community college while all your friends are at their real four-year universities and they're hanging out at the frat house or you know, hanging out at the student functions and all that, and you're at this like lame community college with, you know, ex-military guys who are just trying to get the degree and move on with their GI Bill, and folks who, you know, realize too late that, oh, I do need that degree. And it's not a great fun place, even though I always say, like, it is at least good that we have that fallback for people that make that mistake, because you and I both made that mistake of not
Yeah.
killing it in high school, right? And so we got to have a path for people, and that's
Like
one good
me.
thing about them, right? Yeah,
Like me.
exactly. That's
Yeah, so
so.
I ended up like just like I said, I've worked since I was little, and you know, I've always had a job. It was paper routes when I was really young, but I've always had jobs.
Yep, I
Um,
had the paper route once.
as a teenager, I always had more than one job, you
Yep.
know. Um,
Let me ask you this,
so
like, my
yeah,
favorite thing about the paper route
yeah,
was when you get them in the morning and you take the twine off and you'd be
uh-huh,
folding them up and putting your rubber bands on. And if it
yeah,
was gonna rain, you'd have the plastic bag, and the
plastics, yeah.
smell of those papers, man.
Um,
Every time I see a paper, like, I
uh,
have no reason to buy one, but sometimes I'll buy one just to like read it like an old, like, you know, like it's the 50s and just smell it. But what was my least favorite part of it? I bet you can guess.
uh,
What was your least favorite part of paper route as a kid?
throwing in the rain, maybe, or
No,
Sunday or Wednesday.
collecting.
Oh,
Collecting.
collecting.
You remember that? The little
I got tipped.
envelopes.
I got
You got,
tipped.
did you? See, I lived in one of
Yeah.
those neighborhoods where I feel like nobody
Were you
wanted to
porking?
pay,
Were you
except
porking the paper?
I was amazing about it, dude. I would put it in their door and make sure the door was all the way shut, and I'd like
I
lean it
cannot
up against
believe
the
it.
door. Like,
They
oh,
didn't tip you?
yeah, no, I had a
What?
couple. I had a couple that were good, but most of them were like,
Oh.
I'm paying exactly what I owe with like pennies and nickels, and you're gonna count it. And or I had a lot of people that would stiff us, man. And then like
Oh wow.
the person who dropped it would like tell us, hey, you gotta go, and like my mom would have to come with me and bang, 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 like, hey, listen,
Your
you
mom,
gotta.
that's awesome.
I'm not, because like I was like, I'm
Your
not gonna
mom
go
was
fight
collection.
adults for their paper money. Like, I'm supposed to be getting paid for this. I'm not a bill collector.
It's
Yeah,
like
my
Better
mom
Off
is.
Dead, right? $2.
Yeah, I know, and that's the thing, is we're talking about like nothing. You can't pay your 50 cent. It was like $1.50 or something a week or something crazy. But yeah, my mom was. I learned one good thing. Not, I mean, many good things from my mom, but one good thing I learned from her is she used to call it, oh, never always say boo. So like I remember we had an Xbox when I was a kid and it failed,
Mhm.
and it was only like 3 months old, and I was like, oh, I guess we're just toast, or well, can we buy another? And mom was like, no. And she called Xbox, and I guess they were failing all the time at the center. It's red ring problem. Basically, the solders would fail, and I guess now I know you could wrap it in a blanket and get it really hot, and it would resolder itself. Believe it or not,
Whoa!
or start working
Wow.
again. Yeah, no kidding.
Or catch fire, right? You know, halt and catch
Right.
fire. Yeah.
Right, but I remember her getting on the phone, and she must have been on there for 45 minutes. Nope, let me talk to your supervisor, and they sent her a brand new Xbox. You don't even have to ship the other one back, and don't worry about it, and,
I
and
like
that
your
one
mom
works.
already.
Yeah, and I'm glad that I did that. Like, I had a
She's a
situation a
butt
couple of
kicker.
years ago where you know, the house had a flood and I couldn't get it fixed, and I insisted that they move me and pay for movers when I was renting, and had my mom not taught me that lesson, I never would have done that. So it's a good lesson for people, is like, you know, when that thing comes up that it seems easier to just drop it and pay again or deal with it, like sometimes you need to go say boo and make some phone calls and chase that down, because
I
you
I have
can,
another trick for people that don't pay. And by the way, I can porch still. I
yeah,
can porch a paper without a problem. I'm a good
nice.
bro.
Yeah.
So what I would do is, well, first of all, I've got papers. You know, get the sack on the front and the sack on
Yep.
the back, right? So I've got a sack full of papers on the front. You
Yep.
know, and then when it gets to the point where it's choking me, I turn it around, you know, and do the other side. But I can ride my bike and just you know, throw that and get it on the
Yep.
porch every time. If you're not paying your bill, it hits the door first.
Yeah.
So when it hits the screen
Bang.
door, it's like bang, you
Right at
know.
5:30.
And
Yeah.
what do you know? Like after you do that for a couple days, they're out there waiting for you,
No kidding.
you know, and they're like, "Stop hitting my door!" And I stop and park the bike, and I go up, and I'm like, "You owe me for 2 months of paper. You want to
Yeah.
pay now?"
Yeah. No kidding.
And
You're an
they're like,
assertive little
"Oh,
guy. See, I think when I was doing
you're
it,
not
they
getting a tip."
I did it for the Patriot Ledger in Massachusetts. I lived in Massachusetts at the time, and I think they had a rule that you weren't allowed to throw the papers anymore. And that's why I would like I'd
Huh.
walk up, I'd park my bike
Wow.
and walk up and open the screen of the and everyone has storm doors up there, so I'd open that and I'd sit in it, and I swear to God, I would lean it up against the door just right so I could shut it where the door would click all the way shut. Because I
It
had
must
someone
have taken you
complain like my
forever.
first week, oh, our slider door was always swinging around in the wind because you left it
Yeah.
open. So, but
No,
yeah, I think they killed that.
I just drive down the street.
What do
You know.
kids do now for like their like my real first job was actually before the paper route. I had a job caddying at
Oh,
a
that's been
golf
amazing.
course. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was an amazing job. Although I will tell you, more guys would take you out and play 18 holes and not give you anything than the guys you'd think that give you a 20 or $100 bill. I'm not kidding you. I must have done probably 60 18-hole caddy jobs and not got anything. And not because I wasn't doing a good job. They just, felt like, oh, they must be paying them. It must be free, right? Because they had a line of kids waiting there to carry your bag for you. It was at Marshfield Country Club. But what do you like? That's a good question. My kids are kind of not at that age yet. They're 3 and 6 months. But
Yeah.
like, do kids have like paper route starter jobs anymore? Do you have to wait till McDonald's and
It
minimum
depends.
wage?
It depends. So in Texas, at least in North Texas, where we lived the last 2 years we've lived here in Utah, but for the 25 years before that, we lived in the Dallas area.
Hmm.
And they have these little soccer leagues, and they pay youth starting at age 12, they pay youth to ref the games.
Oh,
And
cool.
so you can get paid, per game, like on a like the 3-year-olds or five, I think it's 500 or something like that. You can get paid like $8,
Mhm.
for a game. But when you are refing the higher age groups, it can be 20, 30, sometimes
Oh,
dollars a
cool.
game,
Wow.
and a lot of times when there's tournaments, on a Saturday, there'll be a tournament and it'll just be, you're refing the game, refing the game, refing the game, refing the game, you'll ref like 5, 6 games in a day and make like $25 a game,
That's awesome.
and you're like 14.
Yeah.
So my 14-year-old comes up with over $100, on a
Nice.
Saturday, and they're like, "Wee!"
Yeah,
Champions
exactly.
for everyone. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
calm down. Right?
We're doing this thing right now where we pay him commission. So like whenever I'm walking around the house and there's Nerf darts everywhere, I'll just go, "Hey Connor, you want to pick up your Nerf darts?" And he'll go, "No." And I'll go, "Well, what if I give you $5 commission?" And he'll go, "Yeah." And he'll pick them up, and then he comes over and he's like, "Hand it over." And I'm like, "I gotta get change." And he's like, "So I've learned I gotta put $100 in ones and fives sitting in the
Right.
house now because my wife learned that from Smart Money, Smart Kids, Smart Money. Yeah,
Yeah.
Dave Ramsey's daughter's book. So any of you young parents out there, read it. We've gotten a lot of
Yeah.
value out of it. But
And all this talk
uh,
that we've had, about the jobs we've had as kids. So I think one of the things that I learned in my youth, right, from the time I was small, was first of all to enjoy work. And that's
yeah,
one of the things that's been kind of difficult without having all the opportunities to, earn money, as a kid, for my kids, right?
yeah,
A lot more difficult than it was for me. And I think the idea that work has value and
yeah,
that you're probably going to be working your whole life, right?
hmm,
And then the other part of it is like, work can't be, a chore or be unpleasant
yeah,
if it's something that you're always going to be doing. Do you want your life to be unpleasant because you're going to be doing this your whole life?
exactly.
So you have to find a way to like find, joy or peace or whatever
Yep,
in work. And so that is true from, in so many ways, like not just finding ways to make money, but also doing things around the house to make the house nicer, or
yep.
to upkeep the house, or doing things for other people, like the other day, well, not the other day, months ago, months ago, I was out shoveling the snow, right, off of my walk in my driveway. And
Hmm.
there's like right over there, there's a widow. And so I usually get her driveway and walk because she's right there. I mean, it's like no big deal.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I just kind of felt prompted to, this guy across the street, he owns a concrete business. He's probably young. I think he's younger than me. Um, his driveway wasn't shoveled, and I thought, like I'm gonna shovel his driveway. I mean, he's a nice guy. I like clay. I'm gonna shovel his driveway. So
Yeah.
shovel his driveway, right? And he has, of course, like I do, he's got the cameras out there and everything. So I get a text message from him like a couple hours later, right? And he's like, "Hey, thanks for shoveling my driveway. I don't know if you know this, but I'm not feeling well today." And so all his kids have left home. It's just him and his wife, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm not feeling well today, so that's why I didn't shovel it. I really appreciate you doing that." I'm like, okay. But for me, I'm like, hey, I'm out here. I've got the shovel. Look,
Yeah.
something that needs shoveling. Like,
Yep.
and that's that kind of attitude is something that I think like my father instilled in me.
Sure.
If a job needs to be done, it needs to be done right. And then, if you see something that needs to be done, do it, that kind of thing.
Yep.
So, I think that's a lesson that has served me my entire career,
Yeah. And I think you can't focus on just the money. Like you have to enjoy, you have to find something that you can do that makes money so you can support yourself and have a life.
Right.
But you have to enjoy, just like anything else, you have to enjoy the journey and the doing of it.
Yeah.
And I find that, I think as you get older, you find that more and more. Like there's very few things that make me as happy as making sure every night when I go to bed, my kitchen is spotless and there's no dishes in the sink.
Right.
And
All the lights are off, all the doors are locked.
Yep, yep.
I
And
mean,
I
there's
and I go
something.
through and I'll be going to get the mail or bring out the trash barrel
Uh,
on Thursdays and I'll see weeds on the side of the driveway and I'll pick them and
like stop, pick them up.
and
Yeah.
but yeah and like sometimes I'm out there for like a half hour and I'm like my back's killing. Why did I pick all these weeds? It's like because it needed doing, right? So
That's right.
I think
Because
that's
it
why we're
needs to
so
be done,
like-minded
Corey.
in work too. Is like there's a lot of people who I don't enjoy this, and how do I do the bare minimum so people leave me
Yeah.
alone? And
Or it's not my
uh,
job. It's not my
yeah,
job. I get that all the time.
exactly.
Well, that's not my role. Who
Yeah,
does it? I don't know, but it's not me.
yeah, exactly.
Okay,
And
you're useless.
yeah, well, and even if it's not you, like at least try to like help the person find who it is and warm
Yeah.
hand it off. Like you've already
Yeah.
wasted their breath and time on you, right? All right, so let's get back to your story here and let's transition to like
Which
how did
one?
you get into yeah, right, which the many lives of Jeremy, right? How did you transition into I mean, let's not go straight into the IT part. Did you have any jobs between that college that were like major, like actual career jobs, or did you go straight from college into the IT space?
Well, so difficult question. Let me put it this way. Uh, I had a well, I've always had customer facing kinds of roles, or operations roles. But
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, even like I'm trying to think because I've had so many jobs, right? I worked for a catering company. I worked for a plant nursery. I worked at McDonald's. I've it's just so many different things, but all of them have had some element of dealing with customers and
Yep.
making sure that they felt heard, and then telling them things that sometimes are great and sometimes aren't, but doing work for them, that kind of thing. But my first technology job was in when I was 16 years old, and so when we moved to the Azores, one of the things that I wanted to do was build a computer like a Heath kit, right?
Yeah. Sure.
And my one of my dad's friends was like a computer scientist. Well, he was an electrical engineer who, anyway, they didn't really
Yeah.
have a computer scientist back then. He was a computer scientist.
But he
So
had built a computer or had a
yeah,
computer and knew a
he
little
he
bit
had built
about it.
two different Heath kits, right? Built
Yep.
two different computers, and I wanted to build one with him. And then my dad got orders, and we moved to the Azores, Portugal. So before we moved, my mom was like, "Well, you can't really build a Heath kit over there without some kind of engineering help because we don't know how to do it, and you're going to
Yeah.
need somebody to guide you. So what about if we just get you a computer?" And so we went around and we looked at a few different things, and I kind of liked the Commodore.
Yep.
I think at the time, was it the VIC 20? I think it was the VIC 20. Or, no, actually, I think it was the one before that. Big screen. It had like a tape drive,
Yep.
instead of the 5 1/4 floppy disk. It had the tape drive. And I took a class at the Air Force Base, basically learning about computing with Commodore. And I was like, I love this. And she goes,
Yep.
okay, we'll get you the new one, the Commodore 64. So I got the Commodore 64. We got a whole bunch of games. And
Yep.
then we went to, and that's part of what I did was in the Azores, because there was one radio station, AFRTS, AFARTS, right? Air Force Radio and Television System. And then there was one TV show, right? Or one TV station, AFRTS. So it was like something else. You need something else. So I
Yeah.
sat there and I learned basic programming, and I got really proficient on the computer. We went to um, Colorado, and my mom said, well, looking around in the schools, everybody seems to be using Apple IIe. We're going to buy an Apple IIe. So she
Nice.
bought an Apple IIe. We got Word Perfect, right? We got
Back when a
um,
word processor counted as like fun, right?
right?
Dude, I
Yeah.
can write a paper on my computer.
I think it was Lotus 123. I think that's what
Mhm.
we had as our spreadsheet. Anyway, she's like, well, you should learn these too. And I was like, okay. So I learned all this stuff on those. So anyway, we're at the doctor one day, and the doctor, we're sitting there trying to get our next appointment, and the doctor's kind of chewing out the uh the I don't know, medical assistant,
Receptionist.
receptionist, yeah, behind the desk. I mean, they're more than receptionists, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So
Office staff. Yeah.
yeah, so she's like, I don't know how to do this, and he's like, well, I need you to, and it was something in Word or Word Perfect, and she just couldn't figure it out. And I mean, listening to them, and my mom's like, no idea what you guys are talking about, and I'm like, I know exactly what you're talking about. So finally, I'm like, can I help? And they both stop and look at me, and they're like, what? I was like, well, I know what you want and you don't know how to do it. I can tell you how to do it. And they're like, come show us. So I walked around, and it was like control keys back then. Like everything was
Yeah.
done in control keys. You didn't have the palette up top or
Yeah.
anything. So I was like,
No,
yeah,
no
control this,
GUI
control
and
that, and you do this and control this. And the doctor's like, do you want a job?
nice.
He was a podiatrist, and I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, if I pay you like $15 an hour, will you teach all of my office staff how to use Word Perfect and
Dang.
Lotus
How old
123?
were you at this point? Are you
This
talking
was
about
in
16 maybe?
86. This was in 86.
Okay.
So $15 an hour is like,
Yeah, I
what?
was gonna say that's
Are you
crazy.
kidding
I
me?
didn't make 15 bucks an hour in my first. I didn't even make 15 bucks an hour in my first job out of high school, let alone,
Yeah. It was like
that's
3 times the minimum wage at the time, right? So it was like
yeah.
ridiculous. And he goes, it's not a lot of hours, but will you teach my office staff how to use the spreadsheet and the word processor? And I was like, yeah. And
Hmm.
so I did. I taught them, and then he had a friend, right?
Yeah, I was
And
gonna
and,
say, knowing you, you turned it into
and
like
he had a
you were
friend.
you were the computer trainer
Yeah.
and this was in
So
Colorado Springs,
at
or
age 16, yeah, Colorado
wow,
Springs. So 16,
yeah,
technically, that was my first computer job because I was a
very cool.
consultant. So I've been
Yep,
a consultant since 1986, but I
that's
don't tell
crazy,
anybody
man.
that because then they
How
think
many
you're 70.
Let me ask you this. So, like, I think for younger people who are watching this, I
Yeah.
also had some early, side businesses in technology. Mine was more like a home theater, custom installing speakers in
Ooh.
people's houses and stuff. But, the first thing I did was I went and at the time I should have created a website, but I didn't. I just didn't have the skills to do it, and I had the tech, the home theater stuff. But I did figure out how to make my own business cards and went and bought card stock and printed
Nice.
them off my old crappy HP printer
Right.
and that sort of like how far did you go with it, or was it just word of mouth and teaching them off the cuff? Did you like standardize anything or do any kind of like get yourself a shirt that said Jeremy Inc. or anything like
That's
that?
right.
Or
we'll code for food or something.
There you
Yeah.
go.
No,
Exactly. Right. Or for
I didn't
15
have
bucks an hour, which people would have been like a
right.
16-year-old, like, yeah, right. And you're like, trust me, I got the
Come on, babe.
skills, right?
Yeah, no, I didn't take it that far. Honestly, it was like it was a podiatrist, it was a dentist, it was a psychology, a group of psychologists, and then oh, what is that called? Brain doctor,
Neurologist.
neurologist. Yeah, so there was a neurology office, surprisingly big office. But yeah, it was them, and so it was just those
Awesome.
practices, and basically like once you teach the staff, you've taught the staff, right?
Yeah.
So those doctors seem to kind of know each other. I don't know how exactly they knew each other, but they did.
Professional organizations, and they probably all went to
Yeah,
the same high school, small
and
town.
I was only 16, so I wasn't adept enough at like networking or
Yeah.
even the concept of networking to go to ask questions like, how do you guys know each other? And is this part of an association? Can I come to your association meeting or something? Like, I never even, that was so far out of my depth, right? Like,
You're
I
just
couldn't
happy to
have
get
done that.
$60 out of those
Oh,
five and,
dude. Yeah. It's
300
like
bucks.
15 bucks an hour. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was awesome. So I made a ton of money. Okay. So you want to hear the funny thing?
Yeah.
First, we did that. And then I had already done that. It had been like a few months. We were in the waiting room and the place was a mess. Like it looked like it hadn't been vacuumed. There was dust on and waste baskets were full. And
Hmm.
my mom was just like, "Hey, are you guys okay? Like, what? I noticed like this place is a mess. What's going on?" And she goes, "Oh, cleaning here. Like, office cleaning, they all suck. The two of them. There's only two businesses in the Springs. This is in mid '80s, right? There's only
Sure.
two businesses in the Springs that do office cleaning, and they both are horrible.
Oh, wow.
They skip out. And if you fire one, you're only going to be able to hire the other one. And we've
Yep.
already hired and fired both of them. We're back again to this one, and they suck. And she's like, "Well, what do you need done?" Well, we have one set of bathrooms. We have a whole bunch of vacuuming, some dusting, and the waste baskets. And she looks at me and she's like, "So, would you be willing to do this with me?" And I was like, "Maybe, depends on how often." And she goes, "How often do you want this?" And she perks right up, right? She's like, "Really? Okay, twice a week." And she's like, "Well, how much are these other guys charging?" And I forget what it was exactly, but we charged like, I don't know, I think it was like 20% less,
Yeah.
and still it was a
Yeah.
freaking steal. Like,
Yeah.
because
You're
once we
making good
got good
money,
at
I'm
it,
sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
once we got good at it, it would take us an hour.
Yeah.
We'd go in and we divide the labor between my mom and I,
Yep.
and an hour later, we're like, "Well, we're done." You
Yep.
know, well, we just made a couple $100.
That's awesome.
Right?
How long did you
So
guys do
we
that for?
few different business. We did that forever. We did that for years. In fact,
No
that was one of
kidding.
those jobs when I went to college, or when I left Colorado to go somewhere else. That was one of the things I'm like, I'm leaving it behind. You
Oh,
know?
bummer. Did you have
Yeah.
did you end up with multiple practices with that, or was it just that one place
Yeah.
and steady and
No, the
okay.
same set of doctors.
Yep,
Same
the
set of
same
doctors
five.
that, because they all had the
Oh,
same problem, right?
yeah. Yeah, of
and
course.
and uh and like I said, for some reason they knew each other, but I never got out of that network into any other businesses. But
It
probably
could have
could have.
just been too that like if you're the five good doctors in that town, you know what I mean? You got some money,
Maybe.
you like good
Yeah,
music and food. It's like, who
right.
else are you gonna hang out with other than the
That's
podiatrist
wild.
and the neurologist? You know what I mean? Like I run into
Yeah,
this problem all the
head
time.
to
It's
feet, you got the whole thing covered.
Yeah,
Right.
well, I run into that all the time. It's like anybody that I am friends with seems to be in some way kind of related to my
Mhm.
career because you just
Yeah.
you gravitate to people with similar interests and incomes, and it's hard to hang out with your friends who are making a lot less money than you or this that or making a lot more, right? So
Well, and
it
then
makes
like,
sense.
in college, when I first started college, I worked at this place that made custom circuit boards for the military,
Yep,
right? And so
very
it was
cool.
electronics assembly is what they needed. And so basically, I'd get a board and a set of parts and a set of instructions, right?
Yep,
It was like, where are all these parts? What's the standoff? All this stuff. And then it was just like, rows and rows and rows of these shelves with these little bins that would have different resistors and capacitors and what have you. And what I got to pick up. Okay, I'd go up there and I learned how to read resistors by the bands, because
Yep.
if you get them mixed up in the box, you got to be like, okay, which one's this?
Yeah.
And so, so I would take that, and I had all these machines to cut the leads and bend them a certain way and give them a certain standoff and do all that. And then usually what would happen is I'd go through like 300 of these and 200 of those and 20 of these and 2 of those and whatever. I'd get all those formatted the way they need to be formatted, put them all in a bin with the board, and then I'd go over to this machine. And you open this big machine and you put the board in just right. And then you put the parts in, one by one, and it can read it and tell what it is and put it in and solder it.
Yep.
So it was it wasn't the clean room, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't the area. But it was the assembly. So I did electronics assembly, and there was a little bit of soldering in that job, but not a whole lot. Well, then we moved, and I got another job working for a company called Action Target. They did steel knockdown targets for the military.
Cool.
Yeah. And it's like
I have a bunch of steel targets in my in-laws, so
okay, so imagine they're pneumatically operated, right? So it'll have like a big steel plate with a little steel circle. It can pop up, pop down, pop up, pop down.
Oh,
when
cool.
When you hit it, it falls down. And then when it pops down, it
reset,
Yeah. So pneumatically operated, but computer controlled, because they have like Mac or Clippard valves that will it'll change based on the electrical impulse. That electrical impulses come from a board. That board then plugs into a serial port, right?
Yep.
The software on the thing runs the board through the serial port. And so they made the software, they made the boards, they made the targets, they made everything. And I started in customer service, answering calls. I was the receptionist, and I also wrote their press releases. I helped them do their catalogs. I did bulk mail printings. Yeah, I mean, and then at some point they got me down into shipping and receiving, and then they said, okay, we want you to do electronics. And so I sat there and they would say, okay, I need you to, we had a board that was hit by lightning. I need you to find the bad parts, pull them off, grab the good parts, resolder them on, clean everything off, test it, and then, we have a new board. I do that, or connectorize a 50 cable, a 50 cable, the heavy cable with 50 little individual things. And I had to put a connector on the end with all the pins and everything. So I got to do all that. So I've seen all that kind of stuff too. And then, one of my jobs I was a fiber optics installation technician. So, use a optical time delay refractometer, OTDR, and figure out where breaks were. And then, once you find the break, right, you gotta be able to patch things, use a fusion splicer, or.
Well, and let's back up too. How old were you, or when was this? What year was this?
Oh, this was when I was like 22.
So for people that don't know, like, fiber is ubiquitous now. If any of you don't know, like, your home internet, your cable, most of it's fiber if you live in nice areas, and businesses, it's like just assumed that fiber is everywhere. But at that time, fiber was not common. So what was that for? Just like major telco connectivity, or like who was using fiber back then? The military?
Oh, no, wait. So fiber was that, I thought you meant Action Target. Fiber was when I was working for a startup. That was in 2000.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, because to have fiber in the 90s would have been really cutting edge. I was the
FOIT. It just reminded me, doing the actual hands-on
stuff.
That stuff. So it just reminded me that. But that was 2000, and I was working for a startup that was providing storage as a service, and one of the things they wanted to do was just make everything custom in their data center. I have no idea why, but it was we're just going to buy miles of cat Cat 5e at the time, right? I obviously not Cat 5e now, but Cat 5e, and you're just gonna connectorize all the cables will be the perfect length, right? Instead of having extra cable, and I'm like, you're killing me, Smalls. So I gotta sit here and connectorize like a million,
You got really good
cables.
at pairing out T568B, and
Oh
that
my
was,
gosh.
crossovers versus straight through.
Yeah.
I know we're getting
Oh,
technical for
no.
folks who don't know what we're talking about. We're talking about when you make a Ethernet cable, like which you'd plug your computer in, there's four twisted pairs, 8 individual wires, and there's a certain pin out. You have to lay it out and slip it into the little connector, stick it in this little plier, and it goes crimp, and then
Yeah,
you're all set. And the easy way to do this, honestly, I'll tell you this, I've done a lot of that too myself in certain points of my career, and there's the punch down panels, which are the
Right.
biggest nightmare.
Yeah.
Where you're spreading out and you got this little tool and you're like click, click, click and punching out 8 individual wires per. I actually always preferred putting the end on it, crimping it, and then putting it into a patch pass through. So they'd have like you plug it in on one side, you make another cable, plug it in on the other side. It was at least better than like holding the cable up to a punch down and you're like click, click, and trying to hold it up there. And one of them, is out of the way and doesn't go into the, so yeah, not fun to do a million of for sure. I had a coworker, and this must have been in 2011, who was just super anal and decided to manually cut every cable in our data center too. And it's like, I get it. They call it cable porn. Like certain guys are just obsessed with that.
Yeah.
We're
Look at how
having like,
beautiful the cables are, It's like,
yeah, and they
yeah,
get
yeah.
special tools to make like a giant French braid of the cables because if you braid them, there's less electrical interference and
Sure.
yeah, like it matters,
Right?
right? Like literally
Yeah,
the
no.
cables, the
The cable
individual
light
strands
braid.
are already braided and then we shield it like it's good, but
It'll
to
be
each
fine.
their own. Funny
So,
story
yeah.
about that, talking about fiber. I had a guy, one of my first big projects in IT was going to the city of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and their IT manager had he had some foresight and he was spending, you know, tens of thousands of dollars on internet connections. So whenever they were doing like a public work project, he would have them lay dark fiber when they dug up the street, and he
Nice.
managed to connect 17 sites with dark fiber. And he bought some switches, and he came to my company looking for us to configure switches and build him a dark fiber network, basically a provider network for all of the municipal sites. And then he would just have to have 2 network, internet circuits. And he had a couple of sites that he could not get approval from the city to lay fiber to. So this guy, he was the type of guy he delivered or he donated platelets every month for the cancer kids. And he, when they would replace, wireless radios or laptops, he would give them away to the underprivileged neighborhoods. This guy was like a saint. What did he do? He went and rented a ditch witch in the middle of the night, snuck out there, dug up the ground himself, and laid the fiber without permission and
Right.
when nobody would notice and like
Right.
he literally was like digging under like roads without people knowing.
Pat down the soil like nothing to see here. Nothing to
Yeah,
see.
like no, yeah, we never did
Plant
that.
some
We took,
shrubs on top,
yep, and then he connected it all up. And I guess if you're on the city council of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, I'm pretty sure the guy's retired now. But if you just decide you want to go on an IT witch hunt, you could look into that. The no permit.
That's
you
great.
know,
So he just lit
fiber.
it up, right? Put some, lit it up with some services, and hello.
Yeah, we threw up some honestly he bought data center switches instead of like proper DWDM provider switches. He
Really?
had 64 strand dark fiber cables. Like we're talking fiber cables like this. He could have,
So
literally sold internet.
he didn't even divide it up. He didn't multiplex it at all. He just kind of
No,
like, I'm
just
just gonna
just
use it
used
all
it
three.
just used
Dang.
it like it was regular 2-strand fiber in a data center. And
The
don't get me
heck?
wrong, like the city of Chapel Hill, I should mention that. Yeah, if you guys
Like,
ever
yeah.
want to become an internet service provider for every business in town, you already literally have the fiber in the ground. You just have to.
Need.
But that's the thing, Jeremy, is there's no junction boxes, right? It literally goes from the junction boxes are in these municipal buildings. So it's like they'd have to literally dig up the street, cut it, splice it, and make a junction box and then run
Right.
fiber off of it. But they have 64 strands all over that town.
Wow.
that they can multiplex, and that's actually a good point. I should go hit them up.
Right.
That'd be
Yeah.
like a little
I
gift
don't
for
think
the
you know
city.
what you're sitting on, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing is I'm sure there's all kinds of people in that town complaining about high internet prices and AT&T hasn't brought us fiber yet. What's going on? And this guy, I'm sure he must be
This
retired
guy.
by now, but he was a
Yeah.
good guy, man. Arik.
Um,
Yeah, Arik, if you're out
Corning,
there.
Corning is like, thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
exactly. They were loving it, man. I mean,
Right. Buy
and
more
that's the
glass.
thing. But he was that guy too. Like it wasn't like he went out and paid some fiber company to do this. Like he would literally wait till they were doing a public works and show up with a roll of fiber and lay it in, and they'd be like,
Right.
"Okay, you're gonna run that through the conduit," and he's like, "Yep,
Sure.
it's not high voltage, so whatever. Who
Yeah.
cares, right?"
Where's the pig?
So yeah, nuts,
Right.
man, nuts. Well, I have a fun, when you tell me the story about the ladies, I'll tell you the story about remind me to ask you about remind me about the parking garage, the rental car, and drinking beer in Chapel Hill, and I got a good one for you. We'll,
Okay,
we'll
writing
skip
that down.
we'll skip it for this, but all right. So you had a bunch. So we've hit a bunch, but I got a question for you too that I
Yes.
want to hit that are kind of they were on the curveball list I threw at you. So the first one would be everybody has had a failure, and I don't mean a failure of somebody else and you had to fix it. I mean like you failed and you knew it and you had to own it. Like tell me about your not necessarily your first, but like your biggest failure that you feel like what happened? How'd you deal with it? How'd you come back from it? Because I think everybody in their career at some point has a major failure, whether it be a job or a thing at their job, or maybe they, lost their job and took too long to get another. Like, did you have any really tough moments in your career that you can speak to and how you dealt with it?
I've had a lot of tough moments in my career. Yeah. Yeah, no loss of that. You know what they say, like if you aren't failing, you aren't trying.
Right?
Um, I when you say the biggest failure, I don't know if it's the biggest, but
The one that stands out to
the
you,
one that just kind of popped into my head. How about that? The one that popped in my head was my first tech job. Okay, so understand, I did all this tech stuff, early in my life, like in my teenage years, and then in college. And it was like I always knew I was good at computers. I always knew that I was just really good with them.
Yeah.
Somehow there's like this understanding that I have, right?
Yep.
And yet I wanted to be a doctor, so I
Oh yeah, you
pursued.
said that. You were
Yeah.
pre-med.
So I was pre-med, biology pre-med for a long time. I even went and volunteered at a hospital for a long time, and to get my volunteer hours and everything. I was getting ready to do my MCATs and everything, and I just talked to too many doctors, really, and
Mm.
too many of them basically said, "Hey, insurance companies are kind of controlling what you can do." This is in the mid '90s. It's even worse now, but insurance companies are kind of controlling what you can do. So you will, they said, "I will know what's wrong with somebody, how to fix it, and what I need to do, and the insurance company won't let me do it." They'll say, "No, you're going to do this," and you're going to try that for like a year or two, knowing it won't help, but it's cheaper. And then after that, you're going to do this. And you're going to try that for a couple of years, knowing it won't help, but it's cheaper, right? In the hopes that sometime during that time span, they get a new job, their company changes insurance carriers, and we don't have to worry about that person. So there's somebody else's problem now.
Oh
And he's
man,
just
that's
like, it's
horrible.
heartbreaking. And I was like, yeah, like that's not why I wanted to be a doctor. I don't, I'm not in it for the money. I wanted to do it to help people. So it's like, yeah, I got to do something else. So I
That's
decided, you know
sad.
what?
Because
I
there's
know.
things you could tell people about IT that would turn them away from it,
Oh,
and
true,
that's
true.
sad that was. Because I could totally see you being, an MD or a pediatrician and coming in, you'd pull off the
Troubleshooting
lab
skills,
coat.
right?
Yeah.
Troubleshooting skills. Yeah. So anyway, I decided like, yeah, I think I've always been really good with computers. I think I'm gonna just see what I can do there. So I'm in this job. I get this job, and my boss absolutely hates me because he was on vacation when I got hired, and he's like the IT manager. And the person who hired me was the CIO. And it was
Gotcha.
because I applied, they needed somebody.
Yep.
Manager was on vacation, the IT director was on vacation. The only people there were like the director of QA and the CIO. And so
Yep.
CIO is like, come in for a meeting. And I'm like, the CIO? Holy cow, what happened here? So I go have this meeting, and I swear it was like, it wasn't even that hard of an interview. I mean, the
Sure.
hardest thing was he's like, you have to connect these 4 dots with, but you only with 3 lines or whatever, it was like one of those think out of the box things,
Like a brain teaser. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, like that's not hard. I love puzzles. And he's like, you're hired. I'm like, okay. So my boss hated me. You were hired when I wasn't even here. I didn't even get to hire you. So everything I did sucked. Well, and he was always threatening to fire me. So I'm sitting there working on this billing cycle. This was US long distance, right? This is the company I was working for. And I'm working on a billing cycle. And the director of IT had come down and asked me, hey, can you work on this billing cycle for me? It's an off cycle, right? It's not the normal cycle, it's an off cycle. I want you to work on this. So I'm working on it. And I don't remember exactly what I did. It was in Unix, like HPUX. I don't exactly remember what I did, but somehow I deleted all of the call records in that billing
Oh
cycle.
no.
I don't even know how. Somehow I
Yeah.
did it. And then I'm looking things up and everything's gone. And I'm like, what just happened?
Oh
Right?
no.
And there's no undelete.
Yeah. No. And they didn't have backups, of course, right?
I
And
don't know. Like, remember at the time, I wasn't a Unix sysadmin. I was
sure.
a billing operator. So
Yeah.
I knew I thought I've just lost, this was worth millions of dollars. I just lost US long distance millions of dollars. So what did I do? I'm like, well, only one thing to do, own up to it and see how I can make it
Fall,
better, or
fall on the sword. Yeah.
so I'll get fired today. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. So I kind of walk into Terry's office, I'm like, I lost all the calls. I was like, I have no idea how. They're all deleted. It's all gone. I don't know what to do. And he's like, and he says, well, Jeremy, I pulled those calls from other places. Like I ran a script to do that. I'll just recreate them. It's fine. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh. But at the time, it didn't seem like a big deal. But like afterwards, right? Like afterwards, it didn't seem like as big of a deal. It was like, whew,
Yeah.
saved by the bell. But later on, I kind of looked back and thought, I could have handled that the wrong way easily, right? I
Oh
could have handled
yes.
that the wrong way, but I owned it and just kind of said, "This is what I did,"
Yep.
and I know I just probably lost my job, but here it
And you
is.
were going to the boss that had been threatening you with
No,
that?
no, I
Okay,
went
so
to,
you
I
went
went to
to
his boss.
okay,
His
gotcha.
boss. Now, what's interesting is when my boss found out, when my IT manager found out, who works for the director, he was
Yep.
like, "I'm firing him," and the IT director wouldn't let him. And ultimately, he ended up writing me up. He wrote me up for it, but he didn't. He wasn't allowed to fire me.
So let me ask you this. So I had a similar situation early on. I won't go into details, but what actually saved me was a very similar move where I went to the boss above him and I said, hey man, you guys hired me to train and try to move into this job, and you put me with these guys to learn before I was ready for that. And I feel like this guy knows because I came in from above, like he hated me. He had me spray painting Cisco switches in the back instead of learning iOS and getting my CCNA, right? And I went to
Well,
him and I said, listen, like I stopped going to school for this, and you guys were telling me that he was going to be all great, and I really do. I love this company so far, and I want to be here, but maybe if I can't get along, maybe I should I like leave or do something. And I was just really honest about it. I was like, I feel like I'm just not you're not getting any value out of me, so like I'm not here to spray paint switches, but that's all I'm doing. And he went, hold on, what? And he went and pulled me out of there and brought me up to sit with the senior guys, and that was how I got my start into the what we do now. So do you think going to that person's boss and owning it, that like not only did it save you from getting fired there, because that would have been the excuse your boss would have used, but did you find that not only owning it, but sometimes going above the person who seems like your boss that day to their boss, did you learn that from there, and do you feel like that was a good takeaway? Because I think that's a good one for people who are listening who might not know that yet, is sometimes the person you think is your boss, they're your boss, but they're not your boss, right? They're your manager. Like there's really an actual boss who makes the decisions, and it doesn't matter what they do. In fact, sometimes you can literally get moved right around them if you make the right, but you can't do it maliciously. You have to do it earnestly and for the right reasons. But okay, that's a really good
and for the
example.
right reasons is a big one. So that's happened several times.
Yeah.
One other time with Terry, that IT director,
Hmm.
and that was basically like Joe, my IT manager was just foot on my neck all the
It's
time.
riding you, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like at some point, and I was there for a few years. At some point, or a couple of years, at some point, I just said, "This isn't worth it. Like, I'm just going to go somewhere else." And I interviewed for a Unix sysadmin position at another company, and they really wanted me, so they made me an offer. And instead of going to Joe, because I think Joe would have been like dancing a jig if I went to him and said, "Hey, I'm leaving," he'd be like, "Bye bye."
Yeah.
Right. But instead, I went to Terry, and the reason was I felt like I had zero relationship with my manager, but I
Yeah.
had a relationship with Terry, and Terry was one of my mentors. Right. He's the one that taught me, you know, look up and look around at what other people are doing. Don't just be focused on your role. Like look around and take chances.
Look for the next thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Learn.
If you don't know something, don't be afraid to like learn it and think that just because it's outside of your role, like you can't learn it. Learn as much as you can, even stuff outside of your role. Don't be afraid to take challenges, even though it's not your job. Like
Yep.
take the challenge, that kind of thing. So anyway, I go to Terry and oh yeah, just real quick. One of those opportunities was he gave me two bills, and he said, "What's wrong with this?" And a call within Texas was more expensive than a call from that same area to Mexico. And he's like,
Hmm.
"What's wrong with this?" And I was like, "Well, this." And he goes, "Find out why and fix it." And so
Yep.
that's what I did. Saved the company like $4 million or something like that, but I had to
Yeah.
stay a half an hour late past my shift. Joe
Yep.
tried to write me up. He wanted to write me up because I stayed longer than without permission from him. Anyway, so I go to Terry, right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm done. Like I can't deal with this guy anymore. I'm out. And he said, "Have you been talking with, Sherry?" And she was, or I think it was Sherry. Anyway, she was our sysadmin. I said, "No, well, she just gave notice too. She's leaving to be a sysadmin somewhere else. We need a Unix sysadmin. How'd you like to be the new sysadmin?" And I was like, "I don't have that experience. I don't know how to be a Unix." "Well, we'll train you." And I said, "Yeah, but what if I don't like it and you're going to want to charge me for all that training?" "No, we won't charge you, and it'll come with a pay increase. Here's the pay increase." And I was like, "Yeah, but I'm not working for Joe." He's like, "No, you work for me directly."
Boom. By the way, that's the saying boo, right? Is like, hey, someone's
I was
offering
like,
you a
"Put it in
step up.
writing and we'll do it."
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing too, get it in writing. But I think there's a couple messages here, right? Like, back to your point, like you don't want to do something that makes you miserable. If you're working for someone that makes you miserable, like, is that job really worth it? Should you stay there 10 years and be
Yeah.
miserable? Like, if they're holding you down. When you said boot on your neck, that guy was literally holding you down
Yeah.
just by stressing you out. You can't learn, you can't take chances, you can't.
Yeah.
So good for
I
you,
created
man.
a At Forsyth, I created a new offering, right? It was a combination of the storage advisory services team and the security advisory services team, and we
Yep.
were focused on data governance, right? Because the security side will tell you like how long you need to keep things and why,
Yep.
right? And which apps those, and what regulations or whatever. And then the storage team will say like, okay, knowing that, here's how you do that,
Yep.
right? And so I was like, we need, you need both sides. You bring them together and you have this really cool data governance offering. And so we did it for a Blue Cross Blue Shield, right?
Yep.
And they loved it. And like we helped them a lot actually. And then another Blue Cross Blue Shield wanted us to do it for them, and a big cell phone company in the Northwest wanted us to do that for them. And so, I'm talking to both of them, and then the Blue Cross Blue Shield in a Western state said, "All right, we want to start this, and we're going to start it on that week, right?" And so my boss calls me and he said, "Hey, that deal is closed. Your deal is closed, and we need you here on that day." And I said, "No, can't do that. My wife is due." It was like in 2 weeks, right? And I'm like, "My
Yep.
wife is due the weekend before,
Yep.
and or the weekend after." And I was like, "She's always a little early. I'll probably be having a baby that week. My wife will be having a baby. Like, I'm not going to be gone that week. There's no way. I have kids, and she's 9 months pregnant. Like, no, I'm not." I'm not traveling at all right now.
Yep.
And he was like, you are, or else, and basically threatened my job. And so I tried reasoning with him, and at some point I was like, well, I'm just telling you I'm not going. And he's like, if you don't show up, it's your job. So I'm like, okay. That's kind of how I left that conversation. Like, okay, like I don't tell you, but I'm not sacrificing my family for you.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, what do I do? And the vice president of services, who I think doesn't work for Sirius anymore. I think well, maybe he still works here. He's at CDW anyway. He'll know. He'll know if he knows if he hears this. But anyway, I called him. I'll tell you later who it was. I called him just directly, right? Called his cell phone and I said, hey, we got this weird situation, and I don't really know what to do, but this is the situation I'm in. So I explain it, and I'm like, like I don't know what to tell you, but my family comes first. And he's like, Jeremy, your family comes first. You're not going on that. Don't worry about it. They can either postpone it. I said, if they just postpone it 1 week, I'm sure that she'll have had the baby. My mom will be up and looking after her. Like everything will be fine then. But that week, like I just can't.
Yeah.
And he's like, don't worry about it. They'll either postpone it a week or they'll find somebody else to cover it. So I get a call, like no joke. 15 minutes after that conversation, I get a call from another one of the managers, his peer, my manager's peer, and he goes, hey, you're working for me now. He's like, the other guy wasn't fired. He's just like, yeah.
But he was, let's move him out from under that guy. Anybody, that's not gonna work.
I just got a call from, that VP. You now work for me, and don't worry about it. You don't have to be out there if you don't want to be. And I'm like, well, I like to do the deal, but I just can't do. I like to do the engagement. I just can't do it that week. So there it is. And they took care of me though. They because they valued me more than I thought.
One deal. Yeah, or the one deal that you literally created the opportunity for by creating those deals. I think a lot of times companies, like all the work we do for these companies becomes the property of the company. And I think they forget sometimes that like without you, it doesn't happen, right? So you can be as happy about what the company did as you want, but like that's people behind that.
Well, and at the time I was also like sitting on, I guess the way I can describe it is the IT board, right? The advisory board for technology for a large faith-based hospital. And the CIO basically said, I just want you full time. So, how much will that cost? And I was like, well, you don't understand. Like, I have to sell services and deliver services. So I have a quota. Well, how much is the quota? And I told him, and I don't know, it was like 2 million a year or something. And he goes, okay, what if I just pay that? Like, you still can't have all my time. I could be here twice a week. And he goes, okay, so if I pay that and you're here twice a week, like all day, 2 days a week, that's good, right? Yeah.
Like, dude, you should have just asked him, how about you pay me the 2 or 3 million and I'll come work for you, right?
Right. So I think that's part of the reason, right? They were just like, okay, that's one account, right? And then I was, doing all this other stuff. So, I think he, I keep wanting to say his name. I gotta not say his name, but
you overplayed his hand.
Recognized, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they knew the value that you had to them, and that plays into the other one I wanted to ask you at this point, which is ethical ones. I've had one of these. I know most people have. Have you ever? And don't say names, even if you can keep it really general. Like, have you ever had a full blown ethical one where you're like, dude, I'll walk if we don't deal with this correctly, or I had a job where I walked. I had a job where I was there for 3 months and I walked and called a friend and went and got another job. They asked me to lie, bold-faced to a customer, and I'm like, no. Like, sorry. And it's not like a show off, like, oh, I don't lie. Like, no, I'm not doing that. That could wreck my career. It's not how I want to be perceived and how I want to act. And
your reputation is more important than that. Yeah.
It is. So have you ever had a situation like that where you felt like, or even borderline ethical if you haven't had a full-blown ethical one? But...
Well, I have. But okay, so let me see how I. Well, okay. Well, I have two, one of which I can say the names because they're out of business, and I actually testified, in a hearing. So
No kidding.
yeah.
Let's hear
So
that one. Yeah.
yeah, that
It's
one is the
public
easier
record.
one to tell. The other one happened 3.5 years ago, 40. I shouldn't probably
Yeah,
say that.
let's save that one then, and you can tell me that on the side, or you can tell me and I'll have to edit it out. But let's
Yeah,
talk about the one
right.
you can definitely talk about. Once
So
it hits
we can
court
talk.
records, then it's fair game to the internet, right?
Right. So I was working for a startup that provided storage services to customers, and this customer was using a lot of Linux. They were a CSP, right? Or a
Cloud
service
service provider.
provider. Yeah, I mean maybe not cloud service provider. Managed.
They were like a managed
Internet.
service or a hosting provider. They had
Yeah,
hosted systems that they
yeah,
would offer,
exactly,
early
exactly.
cloud, like,
Actually, no, I can say their names and everything. Yeah, so this was the Planet Internet Services, right?
okay.
So the Planet, based in Dallas, but they had some other offices. Anyway, and the company that I was working for was providing storage as a service, and it was a startup, so I was customer service, I was installation, I was pre-sales, I was consulting, like I did the data center standards, it was like everything, right? So we have all these meetings with them, and I'm figuring out like, hey, they have all these little Unix systems and all this new stuff. And my company really wanted, they were founded by EMC salespeople. They really wanted to sell EMC storage and have multi-tenant EMC storage. And so like, we need to buy an EMC Symmetrics array
Yep.
to host this customer. And I was like, nope,
Yeah.
it's not on the compatibility list. It doesn't work. It just won't work. Like
Yeah.
they don't support any of the operating systems that they're running. So they run several variants of Linux. No, that's not going to work. And
Yeah.
they're like, well, sorry, but this is coming from above you. This is what it's going to be. And I'm just like, well, I mean, I don't really care who's telling you to do this. It literally won't work.
Yeah.
So they could
Or at
want.
very least, even if you could run it on it, it's not going to be supported. And the customer's going to find out that we sold them a
Yeah,
multi-million-dollar storage array that will not support their operating
well,
systems. It's like,
I had worked, uh, with EMC quite a bit, and I
yeah.
knew guys who were running the compatibility stuff. So it was like,
Oh,
you
you
know,
knew that it would literally not work. Because
it would
sometimes
not work.
there's unsupported and then there's
And then there's
literally it
no,
cannot work, so we don't
right.
support it,
It wouldn't work. And guess what
Gotcha.
happened? They decided, they went ahead and they bought it. And I told them at the time, I was like, no, you need to buy, like a compact.
Yeah.
Compact solution will work for this. And that was our other standard. I'm like, yeah, you need to do a compact. No, we have a compact in the Houston data center. We need an EMC here. Like, you're not
And
listening.
EMC at the time, this was before they had the DMX
Oh,
and
yeah.
VNX and all these other arrays that you could pick
Yeah.
from. It was like Symmetrics was their thing. That
Clarion
was
is
the
what they called
option.
that at the
Yeah,
time.
Clarion and
Yeah.
Solera. They called it, right? The
Oh
file
yeah,
version was
file mover,
Solera.
yeah, file mover, yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway, they bought the Symmetrics, they put it in, and then they tried to get it working, and well, I mean, I tried to get it working, but it was fruitless. Right? It wasn't going to work. And I had a couple of guys working for me that were trying to do it too, and I'm just like, guys, I mean, this isn't going to work. We can keep beating our heads against the wall, and we did for a while, and then essentially the plant just stopped paying their bill because they're like, you had not provided a service, right?
Yeah.
So that went on for a while, and then I left, went to another startup, and then while I was at that other startup, I get this call from the planet's attorney, and they're like, hey, and I knew him really well, and so he and I and we had this really interesting conversation, and he's like, hey, they're trying to sue us for all this back pay even though they never made anything work. And I was like, I will be your witness. So I testified against my own company because they were stupid and they put something in that wouldn't work even after I told them it
Yeah.
won't work.
And clearly, like, they weren't doing that for any reason other than shady kickback seller deals or some kind of,
Something, I don't know.
partnership. yeah,
I don't know
usually
why they did it, but whatever.
yeah, and there's, for people who aren't in our industry and haven't been around, there's some shady things that happen in our world like that, where people have relationships and they make bad technical decisions for the wrong reasons, and everybody suffers. And there's always the technical guy in the background going, "Hey, that's not going to work, and
We
we
see it
should
all the
not do
time.
that."
Even
Yeah,
now, they buy based on relationship, which is good to some degree because
that's
you need a
fair.
level of trust. But if if the trust, is unwarranted, then it can really get you in trouble. You know?
Well, I bet you if you had taught like they were probably talking to a sales guy too. I doubt any like engineers who knew the compatibility at Symmetrics and EMC were going like, yeah, that's gonna work and don't worry about it.
No.
Especially, it's one thing if you're a multimillionaire to have principles. It's another thing when you lose your job and you got kids and you got to support them, and you might be having a hard time getting your job, to not only make those hard decisions and speak up, but then also to go as far as testifying or quitting a job, because yeah, it's, I mean, your life and your kids' lives and your livelihoods on the line, but it's important to have those principles. I think I find everybody I meet has certain things completely separate from their job that are just kind of integral to who they are. And we've covered a lot of good stuff: the military side, the stepdad, your love for music, your technology and your early jobs, and the medical thing. That was really cool. I didn't know that, but I can totally see that about you, that would have been the route you wanted to go. And life's not lived in multiple universes. Who knows? There's
Yep.
definitely some Dr. Jeremy Wonsons out there running around. And if you want to talk about like your kids and your family, that's a good one. But any stories or history that you want to cover that you think would be a good way to kind of finish this out?
Well, let's see. I think if you ask about like what's something that I really enjoy or that keeps me centered, it's nature for me. So
Hmm.
I've been involved in Boy Scouts, Eagle Scout,
Yep.
Boy Scouts since I was young, since I was, I guess, 8 or something. I don't know,
Yep.
but I've always been outdoors, camping, hiking, all fishing, all sorts of stuff, right? All, shooting, all that stuff, and I love the mountains, so for me, just being out in nature and exploring
Yep.
is part of what just kind of makes me happy, and helps to center me. It helps to center, kind of quiet my thoughts, and sometimes that's what I need to think.
Yeah.
So sometimes what I was doing for a while, for quite a while, was I'd go on walks with my wife, and so she and I, like in the mornings or in the evenings when it's starting to get cool again.
Hmm.
Well, I'm in Texas, I guess it's cool all the time here, but no, we would, we'd go out and we'd go for a walk, and we'd walk a few miles, and just walk and talk, um, and just being out there in nature. We had a huge golf course by our house, and
Yep.
so there's all these trails that kind of go through the golf course, a little nature walk, or whatever. And
Nice.
and it was nice, just kind of like, for me anyway, it's very calming and centering, and I have an opportunity to reflect. And I think that's important, at least to me. It's very important to have that time and to really like make time for it. Make time where you can sit and like, just ponder things and think about things, and you're not. I'd silence my phone, and that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, scouts taught me to whittle, for example, and so
Oh, cool.
I have a pocket knife that I use to whittle. It's kind
Wow.
of a bigger pocket knife than most people. You need a big pocket, okay?
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. That thing's awesome. Is that a case? Who makes that? Is that a case or something?
No,
Or
it's
just it's a
it's
special.
not a case. It says Colony of Virginia. I think my son got
Found
this.
it.
My oldest son got this for me. He found it. It's a lock, an actual lock blade, right? It is
Yeah.
a, honest to goodness lock blade.
Well, that's what I was gonna say because it's like, I mean, like someone had to do some serious work to build that thing. That thing is cool. I did scouts as well, and so you said you were an Eagle Scout, so you went all
Yeah.
the way. That's awesome.
Yeah.
My dad was an Eagle Scout. I did not complete. Partly, I moved during it and just didn't find another thing, and had my scoutmaster had a horrible tragedy that kind of took him out of it right before we moved. Yeah. Horrible thing where he lost some family members in a car wreck and stuff, and it was just really weird. But I'll tell you, the scouts were like the best thing in my early life as far as getting exposed to, just to your point, nature. And I agree. I think especially in a job like ours where we can have some days where, you know,
Yeah.
what did Matthew McConaughey say in The Wolf of Wall Street? Like mustard, very like, high frequency,
Right.
like that's kind of can be your life, and especially in the IT architectural and
Yeah.
technical side for sure. So, and you live in Utah now, so is it
Yeah.
a big, I mean, I know Utah's can be kind of deserty, and you had Texas. Is there certain kinds of nature that you prefer over others? Do you like the really green woodsy, or are you more of a desert guy and mountains? Like what's your thing?
Yeah, woods and mountains.
Yep.
And I'm not so far south like Moab or something where it's all desert. Um,
Yeah.
I have like huge trees and mountains right here. That's one of the reasons that I live exactly where I do. I live
Yeah.
right by a canyon, and I'm
Oh, cool.
literally 1 mile from the Uinta National Forest. I can, just drive up through the canyon, and I've got hiking trails and biking trails, and lakes and reservoirs, and waterfalls, and just all kinds of stuff. Yeah, so I go up
Fun.
there, I four wheel, I hike, yeah, kayak.
But yeah, I mean, I think we had a good conversation this time. I appreciate it. I look
Yeah.
forward to doing another one with you. For anybody who's watching, sorry we had to cut out a little section in there. We just want to, protect the innocent
Or
and
the
make
guilty.
sure we're, sticking on to, yeah, or the non-innocent in some cases, right? But thanks for coming on, Jeremy, and talking about your story, and look forward to picking up and maybe hearing more about the family life and all that stuff, and we can talk about your faith, and if you want to. You don't have to get into that
Mhm.
if you don't want to, but I'm sure we'll have plenty more to talk about. And I want to wrap it up with just saying thanks for anybody who watches, CDW customers, random people out on the internet. Hoping to do more of these. Jeremy has some great friends and connections that I'm hoping to eventually do this with, and I've got some from my career too. And hopefully we can, put something out of value that people can either learn from for their career, or just, people looking for good conversations. So thanks, Jeremy.
Appreciate you inviting me.